My name is Melinda Whitaker, and this is a forensics case report on animal hoarding. On Thursday, August 25, 2011, the Sevier County Animal Shelter was presented with 67 animals seized from a home on Engle Hollow Road. The animals included 54 dogs, 4 cats, 6 birds, and 3 lizards. The home belonged to Jeffrey Dale Ward. 54 dogs, 4 cats, 6 birds, and 3 lizards were found living in unsanitary conditions and were seized by the Animal Control Division of the Sevier County Sheriff's Department. Many of the seized animals were sick and malnourished. The animals were examined at the Sevier County Animal Shelter, and the shelter was closed to the public on that day so that medical exams and diagnostics could be done on all animals from the confiscation. According to Sevier County Sheriff Ron Seals, an animal control officer went to a home at 290 Engle Hollow Road on August 24, 2011 to investigate a complaint about poor living conditions for animals. The home belonged to Jeffrey Dale Ward. 54 dogs, 4 cats, 6 birds, and 3 lizards were found living in unsanitary conditions and were seized by the Animal Control Division of the Sevier County Sheriff's Department. During the confiscation, we entered the 962 square foot, 1-bathroom house at 290 Engle Hollow Road in Sevierville to find squalid conditions. Open food cans and waste had accumulated on the floor and counters. The plumbing was not operational, and there was electricity to the house. The smell of animal waste was overpowering, and the scent of death lingered in the air. There were an overwhelming number of animals roaming around the small house. Animal waste was evident throughout the house. Some of the dogs were within pens, including one found dead during the search. One dog was found dead inside an enclosure with its legs stuck between 2 boards. There were empty food and water containers throughout the house that were inadequate to feed the number of animals present. Ages and sexes were intermingled within the house, and Mr. Ward also had sores and bites visible on his legs. Four cats were free roaming with the 53 live dogs. Six birds were found on the kitchen counters in 2 bird cages that had food and water, but did not appear to have been cleaned for several days. 3 leopard geckos were found in a Rubbermaid container on the kitchen counter that was filled with peat moss, but it did not appear to have been changed recently. Food and water were available for the geckos. With the large number of animals seized, itemizing each physical exam would be quite cumbersome. Overall, the dogs were thin. Eyes, ears, nose, and throats were all within normal limits. Their teeth had moderate tartar on most, which was consistent with their age and breeds. Some animals had quiet heart murmurs, and approximately 90% of the dogs had patchy alopecia, and on some of the dogs the alopecia was severe and encompassed more than 75% of their bodies. All appeared to have some form of loose stool. On the cats, 4 cats were examined, and all were thin and had patchy alopecia with evidence of fleas and pruritus. All 4 cats had fecal staining on their tails and caudal thighs. All birds examined appeared to be relatively healthy, and there were no significant findings on the lizards. The seized animals were overwhelmingly positive for scabies and intestinal parasites. With the mixture of animals as well as the intermingling of species, it's likely that the scabies mites were passed from animal to animal due to close contact. Scabies is caused by the mite Sarcoptes scabii variation canis. Coptes mites are highly contagious and are generally host-specific. They can rarely be found on other hosts, including cats and humans. However, with 67 animals and 962 square feet, close contact is certainly present. Infested dogs develop a hypersensitivity reaction to the mite cuticle and feces, and only a few mites are necessary to cause severe pruritus once an animal is sensitized. The favorite locations are the pinna, elbows, ventrum, and hocks, and the entire mite life cycle is completed in 3 weeks. All animals in contact with an affected animal have to be treated, and the housing should also be disinfected. Scabies is a zoonosis. People can develop pruritic papules within 24 hours, and those can persist for up to 21 days after exposure. Usually, the lesions regress in 12 to 14 days if only a few mites were transmitted and contact with the infected dog is terminated. Another concern for diarrhea in the animals is salmonella, which could be carried asymptomatically by the lizards. Since there is limited hygiene and intermingling of species, salmonella could certainly be the cause of the diarrhea in the dogs and cats, in addition to the parasites found on their fecal exams. Many strains of salmonella are bacterial resistant, so salmonellosis is a zoonotic concern. Case ID 18474 is a prime example of animal hoarding. Animal hoarding can be a huge drain on animal shelters. Larger scale cases, such as this one, do strain both the shelter staff and a shelter's volunteer pool. While shelters are the primary group directly impacted by animal hoarding, law enforcement, code enforcement, fire departments, mental health agencies, and legal departments can all be impacted by animal hoarders. An animal hoarder has been defined as an individual who accumulates large numbers of animals, who fails to provide the animals with adequate food, water, sanitation, and veterinary care, and who is in denial about their inability to provide adequate care. The inside of an animal hoarder's home is typically unsanitary and is often covered in animal waste, trash, and possibly even rotting animal remains. Hoarders fail to recognize that they are living in horrible conditions and that they're neglecting and abusing their hoarded animals. Hoarders are typically middle-aged or older females who are often retired and live alone in homes without working appliances. Animal hoarding is thought to affect about 1.5% of people worldwide. On average, hoarders have 41 animals, and dogs and cats are the most prevalent hoarded animals. Most hoarders are considered to be lower income, most are not married, and many are elderly. Animal hoarders do tend to be women, and they tend to start collecting their animals after a big disaster in their lives, such as the death of a child, loss of a job, or another emotional disaster. It's suggested that they think themselves as animal missionaries. They are saving the animals' lives and that they are the only ones who can save them. Public ignorance of animal hoarding does nothing to alleviate the strain that hoarding places on a community. The media often portrays hoarders on an emotional level, and then this elicits sympathy from the public, and oftentimes they support the hoarder in their actions and will offer them money or even more animals. Some animals can go to the shelter from hoarding cases and immediately be adopted out. However, others have to stay for a long time until the case goes to trial. And long-term holding of the hoarded animals absorbs a shelter's resources and space and adds to the stress the hoarded animals have already experienced. And essentially, those animals are victimized for a second time. This case occurred in Tennessee, and in Tennessee, cruelty to animals statutes define cruelty to include failing unreasonably to provide necessary food, water, care, or shelter for an animal in the person's custody. Ultimately, Jeffrey Dale Ward was charged with 66 counts of animal cruelty and 1 count of aggravated animal cruelty. These are misdemeanors, and he ultimately was convicted of animal cruelty. In Tennessee, this means he can't have any more animals. He was placed on probation and likely served hundreds of hours of community service and faced thousands of dollars in restitution costs. While I know Mr. Ward was convicted, I was unable to determine his actual sentencing. This is a list of my sources for this presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me.